Oh, you pushed it live. All right, great.
I see live.
Got some people starting to show up. Got my questions.
Carol looks like she's frozen in time. Can you see it? Yeah.
I see his page, but it's nothing.
They might not have gone live yet. Right?
Right.
There's usually, isn't there like a little delay or something like that usually?
Yeah, there's a
You
delay.
should have like
We're live now.
something, right? Seeing like link and live coming up or something like a title or something.
We're good. Joe, can you hear me, bud? Joe, we're all set. We're all set. We're live, man. We're live on LinkedIn. What's going on, everyone? Joe, can you still hear us? All right, Joe. I think he can't hear me right now. Can he see me? All right. Well, we are live on LinkedIn right now. What's going on, everyone? I'm Jake Dunlap. I have a friend.
You actually.
You see me?
Mm-hmm.
You're live, dude.
There's a delay.
But he can't hear me.
Let me see.
He's talking?
Yeah.
I don't even see him sitting in his seat yet.
All right. So
you can't hear me.
All right. Yeah, so he can see me. Joe, he can see me too, man.
Oh, I don't even see him.
All right. So everyone, we're going to try to figure this out. We'll try to get to where Joe's actually can hear what's going on. Since there's a delay. I don't know.
Tell him he can't hear you.
You can't hear me, Jake? I can't hear you either. My guys can hear you. Hold on. What's
I'll
that?
look you up.
Internal microphone.
You got the guy with the headset stepping in to figure it out.
They heard me before. That's weird. Black magic. Internal microphone.
I think it's
He can't hear you.
You can't hear me, Jake? I can't hear you either. My guys can hear you. Hold on.
I can hear you, man.
What's that? I don't even see you, Jake. Internal microphone.
It's not the mic. It's
the guy with the headset stepping in to figure it out. They heard me before. That's weird. Black magic.
I like
internal microphone.
Matt King.
We're gonna try to start over again.
Matt King says use the force. Like it does look like that in our screens. It's like very red. So it's like, we'll try to do that, Matt. So what's going on, everyone? If you have not joined us before, Joe's going to join shortly. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your Monday. I love doing these Monday at 11 Central, 12 Easterns. It's just a good kind of start to the week. Really good opportunity for, look, Q4 is kind of kicking into full gear now. So, what I want to talk a little bit about is personal brand. We'll talk a little bit about brand. I talk about that quite a bit. Talk about talent. Joe runs an extremely successful agency that he's built, and a lot of it he's done with his own brand, which I think will be really cool and interesting. And then the other piece will be for entrepreneurs. So if you're starting a business, you're thinking about starting a business, Joe and I have both started our own companies, and we can drop knowledge there. So we'll see if we've got Mr. Joe can hear, if he's live.
I'm here, but
Can you still not hear?
we got a bad connection.
Yeah, I think he can't hear for some reason. So while we're waiting, what I'd like everyone to do is, while he's figuring out the audio, what I'd like everyone to do is, if you have a question, drop it in the comments. So
Jake, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, man. We can hear you, dude. It's something to do with your mic setting, because your mic's working well, man. It's the head. There's something wrong with the earbuds.
He's just frozen on my page now.
Yeah.
There's got fucking nothing here.
I love it. It's like just straight to it. So drop your questions here. So again, I think Gerard, by the way, hey, Gerard, thank you so much for the videos. My man here, he sends me some really neat videos on Instagram every once in a while. So I do read my DMs. If you DM me on LinkedIn, you DM me on Instagram. I will respond to your videos. It might take a few days. So again, while we're waiting for this, I'm happy to just jump in. We've got some questions from folks who have already started to do it. Again, if you like what you hear, hit the like button, hit the question, hit the heart, whatever you want to do, man. I like the heart, so it makes me feel good on a Monday. Makes me feel like I'm like driving an impact here. So let's go. I'm going to take my first question here. We got one from a DM earlier. And again, hit the like button, drop your questions in the comments. I'll get cranking because I don't give a shit. I'll just start AMAing this all over the place. And then Joe can hop in whenever he joins. So first question from Joe Hader. I don't know if it's Hater or Hatter, so my bad. I'm just going to say Hater. I think that's how the dude from Saturday Night Live does it too. So how did you get agency clients in the very early days? So his question was, as a consulting firm or Joe starting his agency, how did you get clients? So look, one of the biggest mistakes that I realized I made early in my career, and I didn't realize what a mistake it was until I got to Skaled, is networking. That I didn't network for shit. I was so focused on being a VP of sales and, building teams, running teams, all of that I didn't put networking on a pedestal like I should have. And so what ended up happening for me is that because I didn't really do that, a lot of my first clients, man, I had to go outbound. So I was just finding startups that had just raised money and said, hey, as you're going through specific scaling challenges, you're probably starting to think about this. Does that make sense? And then I started networking, right? So I started to say, hey, if you're trying to go out and network, or if you're like, hey, Mr. CEO, CRO, let's just have a conversation and then you can connect me. And so early days for me was really, really about.
Are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you. I can always hear you, man. The question is, can you hear me?
All right, internal microphone. Yeah, I can hear you now. We're good.
Oh man, he's live.
I can hear you.
Good. Well, that's a start. So we can see. We'll be able to see you and hear you. I was just jumping in the first
technology. God.
The first question we had, which was from.
Let's do it.
First question is from Joe. So I just answered it. He said, "How did you get your clients in the early days?" And I said, for me, I did one of the biggest mistakes that I didn't realize until I started my own company is I did not network very well. I was so focused on being an excellent executor and leader that I was not focused on networking. And so a lot of my out of my first, I'd say probably 20 clients, I would guess that 15 of them came from either cold outbound in a coffee that then turned into a client. And so for me, that was my big lesson. So if you're ever thinking about starting your own company, start networking early. That was my story. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, so I think you need to think of yourself as a gateway or connector in the industry. That's when we started to make, exponential jumps forward. Is don't try and put out your service and sell a service. Think of yourself as a gateway, a connector, and that gets back into networking, if you will, but offering a tremendous value to the marketplace first, and then give yourself 6, 8, 9 months runway and be patient enough and then build on that. But every single day being that connector to the industry is critical.
I think so many people, they get hooked, and this is what I see, Joe, maybe just, and I'm sure a lot of guys come to you. I get a ton of VPs, mutually role, and then they want to get into consulting. And I'm like, that is amazing. Control your own destiny, do your own thing. And then what happens is after they get an initial push of clients, they want to start consulting, great. They get an initial push of clients. And then, look, you go through some ups and downs, right? The well hasn't, you haven't been in the market enough. So after 3 to 6 months, it dries up, and then they run straight back to the safety of full-time work. And it's because they never, the problem is I think people, and I see this in sales leadership, that's kind of my jam, is that they build a lifestyle that can be supported by $400,000 a year. And the thought of them having to go back and making 150 in the first year or two is an ego hit. I want to do it. And that's why I see a lot of people in the first 6 to 12 months fade out, because they can't stand the downturn. Like you said, giving value, and then just trusting in it. And I don't know if you see that with other guys in your industry too.
Yeah. So what happens with consultants is the hardest part of business is getting business. fulfilling the business is the easiest part. So typically people will index towards what they like to do. And so they come from a whole career of just having to fulfill business because somebody else wrote it, the firm they worked for, or they showed up, handed out the donuts and made the sale, but they never actually had to load that pipeline themselves. And when you first get into consulting, and so as a consultant, you have to think of it two ways. You're either you are your business or you're building a business. And you have to make a decision early on in which of those it's going to be. Do you know how many years it was before I started throwing back decent cash that I was paying people a lot more than I was? How many years I always say my venture capitalists were American Express, MasterCard, right? My 401k and all that stuff. People have an ego and they let that ego dictate their next move, and it screws them all the time. But if you're going to go into consulting, you better absolutely embrace getting out there and filling the top of that funnel, because the fulfillment of the business, you can hire somebody else to do that. That's why there aren't many entrepreneurs, because it's the entrepreneurs who fill the top of that funnel with biz dev, and it's a lot easier to hire people to fulfill the business.
Yeah. Well, and I think they like doing both. You know, I think I probably made that mistake for the first few years. You know, I was still so because I like the work. I like it. I like working with CEOs on their business, you know, and I said out loud that I wanted to start a business and not be and I had like a couple of employees, and it's just candidly, man, I wish I could say that it's been shorter. You know, it's 6 years in now for me, but I feel like it's just the last 2 years where I've had this revelation, like, Jake, it's not a business, doing a lot of the consulting. You know, but I think that's a tough revelation for people, because they almost feel like they're not doing their job. You know, if they're like hiring, they can't do it as good as me. That's probably the most.
And they're not supposed to. And they're not supposed to do it as good as you, or else they would be
exactly right. That's exactly right, and that's okay. 80%. That's our goal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we had another really good question here from it's from Khalid. He says, we run a digital agent. We ask clients to sign 1-year agreements. So services business, 1-year agreements. What are your thoughts, man? What are your thoughts on how services businesses should think about structuring, you know, how they sell and contracts?
Look, it's obviously a lot easier to build a business on predictable recurring revenue. If you can get somebody to sign up for a 20 grand spend per month for $240 a year, you can develop your business a different way and expand it a lot quicker as well. Not all organizations, especially if you're just getting into the business, are going to trust you without a large body of work behind you. So I think I would love to get a 1-year commitment on the media side of things, and depending on what you're selling and how you're providing it, yeah, but you better be prepared to go in. The first year we did media, I was giving away $30,000, $40,000 packages for free to clients, because I then fulfilled it on the back end recruiting side. So I actually gave away tremendous value to clients in that area. Now we look for longer term relationships, but my media build revolved around our other core competency, which was search.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's it, is that people, if you can get away with, of course, right? I mean, that's my thought on it. And for us, a lot of what we try to do is, you know, we try to make things almost a project based that we then turn into something that in consulting, it's a little bit different where, well, I don't know. I mean, Joe, you can call me out if you think it's bullshit, where, you know, at least we run into is, look, one, people are skeptical of sales consulting in general, more so than like marketing support, because marketing's used to having agency help. That's just like a standard, right? Like, of course, you're going to hire an agency. Where we do what we end up doing, and we convert at almost 70, well, at over 70%, is we try to make things very project focused, of like very clear black and white success, and especially if it's a new relationship, success, and then we flip it in. We set that expectation up front. But I'd love to get your take, man, if you think that that's, you know, maybe we're being short-sighted as a consulting firm, because I have a feeling a lot of people that are doing their own thing or are thinking about this probably do it the similar way that I do it.
Yeah, look, to me, I'd rather have a customer who spent $500,000 over a year and a half time than 300,000 over a 4-month period, just to use numbers as an example. And the reason for that is it denotes a longer relationship and a deeper relationship. Oftentimes, depending on what consulting business you have, there are additional services and opportunities that can be provided with that client, again, depending on the business you're building. So to me, I'm less worried about quick hit on the revenue side, and I design our relationships with our clients for longer stretched out periods. And what that does is takes the revenue and makes it like this versus having a lot of businesses that have revenue like that.
Yeah, dude. I think it's, you probably can relate. Actually, here, I'll go ahead because we've got a question here from Ryan, Senior VP of Branding and Research. Ryan Morabito, what's going on, Ryan? Ryan said, what's the biggest mistake Joe made? And then I'm going to come back to my comment. Biggest mistake you made early on in building the business. So when you think about the early days, you know, first 1 through 3, 4, 5 years, whatever you consider the early days, what were some of the mistakes that you look back and, you know, you guys operate foundationally different now?
Hiring, putting salaries above where the industry norm was, and well, let me answer it. Figuring out what I could get away with paying somebody that didn't give me a shot at best athlete. As soon as we moved to paying substantially more with a different model than the industry, we got best athlete on the field. So I wasn't spending time in the hire, train, fire, grind, and losing cohesiveness on the team. So our compensation plan here is unlike any other in the industry, is we bring in and we comp relative to getting best athlete in the seat, write them off for the first 6 months. But after that, the ROI for both them and us is tremendous.
I love that. So comp, right? Thinking I'll just hire these like top people or pay them, as opposed to thinking about like the right incentives. Is that what you would say? You know, you'd say like it was more about the incentives. Hold on, Joe might have lost it.
I lost audio.
Are you back yet, man? All right, Joe. Whenever you can hear me,
we're
frozen.
Jump
back in. So I'll keep rocking and rolling here. So for me, I'll tell you the biggest mistake I made early on, guys. Biggest mistake for me was I didn't do what Joe said, or actually even what the advice that Khaled said, which was to sign annual agreements.
Can you hear him?
Early on, I can hear you, man.
It's not us.
It's not us.
It is you.
No.
It is you.
Something like that.
I think I should try and go back in.
So, yeah, come in. Go out, come back in.
Let's refresh that.
So for me, again, I'll just kind of try to give you all like my 2 cents. I wasn't as purposeful as I should have been about the product selling. Nature of consulting and agency work, you can do a lot of things. It's a people business. And so for me, I think one of the big issues I made early on is it was like, is it sales related? Yes, we'll do it. And so I had to do a lot of short term. And I didn't realize that honestly for like 3 or 4 years. So it's just been the last like 2 years where I was like, yeah, this is what it is. And I've kind of figured it out. Like, this is what, like who we're going to be. So I think that's it. That's my advice for anyone. Just decide who you want to be. You know, you can still be a little, you know, flexible with that, but also don't try to be everything to everyone early on. So that would be like my piece of advice. So, all right. So while we're waiting, Joe, I think he's having issues. All right. I had a question from Adrian Morris. Adrian said a lot about focusing on outcomes in sales and focusing and marketing too, as opposed to a lot of the leading indicators. I think a lot of people focus very early on activity versus like, you know, meaningful conversations, how many appointments we set. All right. Maybe Joe's back. We'll see.
I'm back.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. So the question was, the question that I was getting ready to tackle is around measure early predictors for success, right? So when you think, Joe, about early in your business, and maybe even today, you can share. I've been talking a lot about, people always want to focus on activity, right? Activity versus like initial outcomes, big meetings or something. And I'd love to hear, maybe for you, when you think about biz dev, what are some of the leading indicators that you track? And if you had, like, one of Adrian's questions was, if you have a team of professionals.
He's breaking up on me again on the tech side. He's frozen again. He's frozen.
All right, what's up?
Hey, that's better.
We'll be back in a sec. We'll see what
Oh,
happens.
dude, you sound much better right now. Your connection before was dog crap.
Yeah, I'm not sure, man. I'm not
All
sure.
right.
It's
This
the
is a
third
lot
party.
smoother.
It's the third party site, man. You gotta do with what LinkedIn gives you. They only have like some very few options that you can select for this.
I know. I wanted to blow my brains out when we started a couple of months ago, which is why we backed off on it.
Yeah, it's all good, dude. I mean,
Yep,
look,
I'm
we're
with
back
you.
in. We're back
All right,
in.
let's do it.
All
Let's
right,
go.
so question was, what was the question? Oh, it was about leading indicators. So look, I've been a big proponent. I feel like sales in particular, and even marketing, is overly focused on volume-based metrics because that's what we focused on in the past versus outcomes, initial outcomes. And so I'd love to know kind of on the agency side for you, and even maybe you have some input if you had sellers, like a larger sales team. What do you feel is like the first metrics that you should start tracking? Like what actually matters in the sales cycle, and what have you seen as like noise?
So and it's changed in the last few years. When I consult for these sales organizations, and you always sit them down and you say, okay, what's the first, when you set your goals for next year, tell me how that goes. And invariably, everybody starts with a number. And they start with a number, and then they start to do math backwards, how many calls they have to make, what their average fee is, what their average sale is. But it all comes back to numbers. And while sales is what drives the gas that goes in the tank, I get that. But I think now, at least in our industry, I want to rank just as high when I put together my business plan for my individuals. What is the marketing and media and branding and reputation building at the same time, concurrently with it? Meaning, when you put out an article, how much engagement did you get? All right, I want tracking on that. When you engaged in a conversation or you put a post out, what were your metrics on that? Now, still on the other side, I want to know what are the key numbers, depending on your business, what were sales steps that led in. But when we started to switch over to more of the marketing forward and having sales activities lag behind that, is when our average sale went up dramatically and when our top line volume went up and profit went up as well. So I think people need to spend a lot more time in developing their brand and their messaging out, because that sets up the sale.
Yeah. All right. So that actually is a perfect segue. So for you, so what I'm hearing is for the people that are involved in sales at your org or companies that you work with too, you're not having them track, emails and calls outbound. Like what is that for sales? Like that first indicator for you that you think sales should be tracking. So when you think about what they should, like what is that for you?
In my business, it's conversations with the hiring manager about the potential opportunity that they want to bring our firm in to close on. So it's actually having that conversation itself. Now, there's a couple ways to get there in our business. Some of it is referral business, but a lot of it is based upon the reputation in the marketplace and what we put out. See, we specialize in our industry in surgical robotics, imaging, navigation, structural heart, some very specific verticals within medtech. And we put out massive content in the industry around that. None of it pushed towards sales, but only pushed towards establishing an expert POV as our business knows the industry, usually better than our hiring managers, because they're so fixated on their business, not the whole landscape.
Their own world. So for your sales org, what I'm trying to get at maybe, Joe, is for your org, let's say if I worked in sales for you or for your org, how would you know if I was generating enough opportunities? Or are you saying in your mind, you're like, look, dude, sales job is not to generate opportunities, it's to close the shit out of them?
Shit. In my organization, when you start out in your first 6 months to a year, I care what your plan looks like on the weekend and coming into the week. So if we're going to get right down, and then how many conversations do you have set up for that week, and who are those targets for that? Remember, there's two sides to my business. There's the fulfillment people and the rainmakers. The rainmakers book the business. Fulfillment people find the individuals to match that. So when you first come in, you're all fulfillment. I want to see your plan. I want to see your target companies. I want you to identify all the target companies in that therapy in the industry. And then I want to know, but we don't track phone time. We do not track. So this is really important too, Jake. We do not track numbers in my organization. You know what we do? We make it insanely hard to get here, and we look for the behaviors in the individuals that once we give them the game book, we're there to coach them along the way, but we do not track numbers. Most search firms track phone time, number of calls, etc. We have not tracked any numbers other than the success board for more than 15 years. And we're the number one search firm in the world in our space.
I love that, man. And that's kind of what so your mantra is, again, if you hire the right people that, again, don't need to be taught like how to run a book, right? Then you're really just coaching them, to drive more outcomes.
Right. If you take a great athlete, you show them any sport, and then you show them what it looks like in the hitting area, right? Whether it's tennis, golf, just here's what a pro does in the hitting area. How you get to that hitting area and how you leave that hitting area, like a golf club, I don't care how you get there. You know, you got the Jim Furyk swing, right? And then you get the Tiger swing. But in the hitting area, physics are physics. But how you get there, I really don't care. We had the president and CEO of one of the largest search firms in the world in here a week and a half ago, and some discussions we're having. And he walked through my bullpen. He said, "This is the quietest bullpen I've ever seen in my life," right? Because we don't take a numbers-driven mentality, i.e. call center. Each of these people in here, and it's a big, big firm, know exactly what they have to do, and I let them solve the problem, how to get there. Of course, we give oversight and guidance, but we let them, you know, unravel the solution as it fits their style of business.
I love that. Well, I think a lot of people, yeah, maybe it is that. Maybe it's that Pennywise, pound foolish, right? Where, well, we don't want to pay this, or we don't want to, or we're going to have unrealistic expectations that this person kind of comes in and hits the ground running. Maybe that's what stops a lot of sales orgs from doing it. You know? Well,
I think it comes back to hiring best athlete again. Is a lot of sales organizations figure out what they can get away with on the hire, again, for the pack of cigarettes and the beer money, and that's what you end up having sitting in the seat. Yeah,
I think that's 100% spot on. I mean, for all the sales leaders, I mean, my audience is we have a lot of sales leaders. I think what happens with them is that they start to get, especially if they're venture backed, right? They get that pressure from the VC of like, we need bodies, you know, and whether they're being as truthful with themselves or not, but that is the attitude, right? Like, hey, I'm supposed to add 30 new people in the next, 6 to 12 months. I need people. And then, but nobody's calculating the cost of churn, the cost of like your mental stress, like those people not ramping correctly. And the fully loaded cost and revenue lost is so much higher when you take that approach. But again, a lot of people just don't want to see it that way.
Yeah, and it's sustainability of the players, right? So what I really want to look at a lot of times is I would rather, and when I give counsel to startup emerging tech, med tech companies, and they say I have to build a force of 10, I'm like, let's cut that down to 6 and hire force multipliers. Because you and I have run sales organizations that the top 3 salespeople will usually be responsible for a majority of the sales. And so what you then do is you start to dilute out the team, and great performing teams look down the line and look at the 2 or 3 underperformers, and it kills the esprit de corps. Where if you get a pack of Navy SEALs, badass Delta people, man, what they do is they sharpen each other. And that's what our organization has been built around for the last 3 decades.
I love that, man. Yeah, I think, again, there's just, it's this pressure that if you can just wait a little bit longer, you know, there's enough really great people out there that if you have a good culture, you've got the right plan, the right incentives for like the right great people, because they care about something that's maybe a little different.
Correct.
That it's always worth it.
Correct.
So Steve Nuttleberg, what's up, Steve? Steve's got a question. He says, Joe, you've developed your personal brand. How have you managed your time to be as efficient as possible? So when you think about, and I was on a conversation with a VP of sales this morning, guy runs a 20-person team in New York, and asked me the same question. Jake, you're running a business. Like, how do you find the time to post every day and do all this? So maybe talk a little bit about how you think about this, why you think it's important. Because I think that's a lot of people. A lot of people are like, I kind of think it's maybe important, but I don't quite know exactly it. So what does it mean to you? Like, you know, how do you manage your time? Why do you prioritize this over other things you could be doing?
Yeah. So let's start at the 20,000 view. I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning. I go to bed at 8:15 every night. In the 4 a.m., I usually get up in the first 45 minutes. I answer prioritized emails. Then 15 minutes later, trainer shows up 5 to 6. I train. And then the rest of the day is half-hour sessions all the way through the day. Nothing usually lasts more than a half hour, any meeting I have. So what that allows me to do is knock out about 18 to 20 meetings. We also have what's called an office of the CEO. I have somebody who manages my back-end production company, Icaro, and so he's a force multiplier in whatever direction I give him. I have another young lady who manages my desk and my production level as a salesperson. She then does nothing but handles my requests during the day on that. And then I have somebody who handles my ops and running the business. And they're all super smart, super driven people. And what they do is they will get anywhere from 5 to 10 directives per day that help drive from a philosophical as well as tactical perspective all that's happening in the organization. And then, of course, I've developed a great leadership team of 5 or 6 people. So what I need to do, and a good friend, Scott Hunnekins, taught me this. He's like, look, dude, he says, you can only do so much in the day. You got to pick the critical things, and then you got to hire insanely great people next to you, commit to the spend, and then over time, that ROI will eclipse the extra couple $100,000 you put in your pocket, if not but for. So that's basically how I do it. And one other thing, and I came up with this recently, is I live 2 lives, one of approximation, one of precision. A lot of times I'm running down the road as an entrepreneur. I just need to be close enough, and I bounce off the guardrails. And that's probably 80% of my day. And then the other 20% is a life of precision, where I have to be spot on with financials. I have to be spot on with technical things, right? Like this, my production team and their cameras and all that. But other than that, I don't get wrapped around the axle, getting caught up in perfection forced on me from the outside. Good enough is good enough for me until it isn't.
How do you determine that, though? How do you?
It depends. If I'm sitting down and I'm so Rena comes to me, who runs my ops, and next month I have to come up with 400,000 cash for a project we're working on. Right? That has to be precision. I have to know exactly where I'm going to pull that in from. But we're also pushing a new practice in our business in the next quarter called V&V, voice and vision in that business. And I just have to be close enough with the first 10 decisions, because if I wait for perfection to get that started, I'll never get it started.
Yeah.
And again, I think about it like guardrails. What is going to be good enough that's going to allow me to hurdle down that highway, and then know that during that hurdle, I'm going to have to get precise for 2 or 3 decisions, and then I go out wide again with approximation.
Okay, that makes sense. How do you, let me ask you this about the 4 a.m., like 4 a.m. every morning, 8 a.m., or every night, 8 p.m.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I've started this ritual of waking up at 5 a.m. ish, right? And I'll tell you why the ish. I travel a shit ton, man. And I feel like, look, if I get in, you know, last night I got in at 12:30, for example, right? And I was doing this regimen. So for the first 45 days, it didn't matter. I woke up at 5 a.m. regardless. I got 4 hours of sleep, whatever. And it wasn't because I was out partying. It was literally all travel, or like I was going to Dublin and my time schedule was all messed up. Like, how do you balance that in? I mean, this is more of a selfish question. So how would you deal with that? I've tried to create kind of sliding scales of like, look, if you're traveling and this is this, then this is like the allowed, or are you regimented? Doesn't matter if you get in, doesn't matter if you're traveling, like every day 4 a.m.
Yeah, so it's the second of the two. Is like, we were in Cali last week, where it's a 3-hour delta from the East Coast, right? I would go to bed. I mean, like, if I could, I went to bed at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, and woke up staying on the same time frame, because it was a 2-day turnout there. Regardless, now obviously, yeah, you've got to watch your health, so you can't be a tough guy for the sake of being a tough guy. And we both, when we're laying in bed staring at that ceiling, we're either being lazy or we're listening to our body. And right, so you making a short-term decision for 4 or 5 days in a row and beating the shit out of your body. Now, if you're drinking too much, if you're eating like garbage, if your stress is super high, your body may shut down on you. It doesn't do you any well to fire through that. But what you need to do, though, is make sure, ask yourself that legitimate question. Can today be a 5-hour sleep day because I need to stay on that line? I mean, that's the decision I make very often. And I do a lot of travel. And, you know, and I don't mean to be this to boast. We travel private as much as we can for that exact reason. You know, I'm 57. I treat my body like a pro athlete. And so we hit Boston, Chicago, Tucson, Flagstaff in a 5-day period and hammered out things, but we could only pull that off private with my team because we didn't have to wait in hotels overnight. We didn't have to sit in airports for an extra 2 hours. And when you take that on an order of magnitude over a year, 2 years, 3 years, you're cutting millions of dollars of earnings off your back end.
Yep. So it sounds like a lot of what you try to do is you manage travel and booking to this schedule too. So whether it's being able to travel private or, like, again, just timing things correctly to where it doesn't infringe on it as much as humanly possible.
Correct. I never use it as an excuse. Like, I mean, lazy is not an opportunity that I'm interested in exploring. And again, although sometimes, very rarely, I'd be like, shit, I got to sleep until like 6 because my body's telling me. And then I would screw, the hundreds of people that count on me every day to show up on the field if I actually had to crash and burn because of health reasons.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So for the most part, regiment 98% of the time ish, grace when you feel it, when you need
Correct.
it. Okay.
Perfectly put.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to find the balance with right now. And I think a lot of people are, right? I think that this is something a lot of people tackle. And especially people, I feel like in the sales world, they feel like they have to go do it. Right. You feel like you have to, like, I grew up in this culture, man. I think back to like 15 years ago, where like you'd be out with your VP and it's like, if you weren't staying out drinking till whatever it is, I know we're kind of digressing, but I think it's an important topic, that you were, that like some type of badge of honor, like how little sleep, how much can you put yourself through versus trying to really treat your mind and your body like a high performing machine, because it is, right? What you put into it and how much sleep has a direct correlation to your output and your quality, really just your quality of output. You can still go in and crank a bunch of shit. But man, when you take off, like my wife and I went to Napa not this weekend, last weekend, look, we had fun at the wineries, right? So then for me, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do 9 days with 0 alcohol, right? Like it's the balance that I think a lot of people aren't willing to like make the change on.
Yeah. And you don't have to be a pro athlete to act like one and treat your body and your performance like one in the sales world, because the people who take home 3, 4, 5, 6 million a year as businessmen, it's not by mistake. And they really do treat their bodies, their minds, their playing field, how they get on and off the field, all like a pro athlete. And I think more individuals who really looked at the careers as pro athletes, who were serious, like heart attack serious about building something meaningful and not just how much money you make, which we all keep score that way. Absolutely. I adopted that pro athlete mentality from trainers, coaches, masseuse, travel, private, food I put in me, how I schedule my training sessions, meaning each day on the floor, like an athlete, like a pro athlete.
Yep. How would you suggest someone scales that? Right. So let's say someone is not you, right? Like hasn't put in 30 years of work, right? Let's say someone's earlier in their career, right? Let's say I'm early 30s or even mid 30s. How do you, the discipline, right? The discipline, there's certain things that like, look, you can just make yourself your chicken and rice every day, right? And then you see guys who do this stuff, right? How does that scale to, someone who's a sales director or VP or manager?
Yeah. So first make a list of what's important to you, right? And then put it away for a week and then revisit it and then look at it again and really be honest. And then take what's most important to you and then start to design around that. And so is your family most important to you? Is money most important to you? Is building out your company? Is building a team? What's that? And then that will lead you to what activities you should be putting in place. And then what I would look first for is structure around your day. That's the easiest one.
Right.
And there's rarely, I'm trying to get it down to 20 minutes, but there's rarely a meeting that requires more than 30 minutes, no matter what you're doing. And so if you start your workday at 7 a.m. and you end it at 6, right? That's 11 hours. That's 22 meetings. Take out 30 minutes for a reasonable lunch. You can get a lot done. So that is the very first place I would start, is on your schedule. And then what you can start to do is you can start tweaking it down, where if you're used to getting up at 6 or 6:30 and starting your day at 8, let's get the structure down on what you're used to, and now start leaking back into the bottom of it and pick up an extra 4, 5, 6 meetings, phone calls, appointments, commitment to developing content, and now pull it down that way and compound that over a week, a month, and a year. And dude, you've just doubled your turnout.
It's insane, man. And how do you balance that? Look, so I'll talk about like even some of like my employees, my people, right? I get a lot of questions around work-life balance, right? And I think I have my answer and I'll give it after. How do you, whenever people come to you and say, Joe, look, man, I think I can be I am a superstar. I can be a superstar, but working 11 hours a day, nah, man, like I'm not, or I like to, have more ideas or free time. Like, how do you, and obviously look, the difference between being world-class, but how do you get those people who are like, even I've got people who are like, seriously, like borderline high performers that, there's this idea of work-life balance. And how do you, I'm sure people ask you the question, right? Like, how do you think about this for yourself? Mm-hmm. Like this concept of work-life balance?
Mm-hmm. Well, so whenever somebody brings that up, I'm like, well, what's your definition of balance, right?
Of course.
So just for full disclosure, I'm on my third marriage, right? Because the first two, I picked the wrong partner for me, right? I wasn't the solution to them. So first of all, decide who you're going to spend the rest of your life with, because that could be the most important decision you ever make, number one. Because if your home life is not set up appropriately and you're not and you haven't set up as partners yet, you are just going to explode. Something's going to give and everything's going to fall apart. So that's the number one thing, is who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Most key decision. And then after that, have that conversation with them. You know, I love the guys, and the counsel I give is that, you know, one of the guys, one of the girls, it doesn't matter which one, they're on vacation, they're working their ass off while on their vacation. Their spouse or girlfriend turns around and goes, all you're going to do is work. And then the silly person turns around and goes, well, how do you think we're flying in this plane or staying in this place, or blah, blah, blah. Wrong answer, because that's what you want. The answer that you can give is you turn around to the person and say, work makes me happy. And so what you have to understand is, right now, if I don't handle this 30 minutes of work in our 24-hour day, I'm going to be clutched up the rest of that time. So is it cool if I take that 30 minutes of answering these emails so I can go back to enjoying everything, right? So that comes back to that relationship again, on the work-life balance with the family. I got a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old. As often as possible, I am home with them at hockey, at soccer, eating dinner, being there for them, texting during the day, engaged constantly. So I don't worry about people's work-life balance. In regards to the people who work with me, Jake, you own your own business. We're not supposed to ask people to work as hard as us. I certainly do have people here who work just as hard as me, and burn it just as hard, and I'm thankful for them, and I love them for that. And I try and create an environment here, and the hiring process is so severe here that once you're on the team, we don't inspect anything anymore. Again, it's like BUDS training. I come back to the SEALs a lot. Once you make this team, as long as you don't steal or lie, you're totally safe for your career here. And that's like a real, that's a promise to everybody here. And once you make it through the process, we have defined that we're the right organization for you, for what you want. There's a lot of people we will pass on, not because they don't fit us, it's because we don't fit them. And that's a little bit of a sort of a shift in thinking.
Yeah, again, this goes back to what we talked about with hiring. And I think a lot of that is, you know, for me, I'm thinking about, for us, it's like, I feel like at a growing company, you need people who are marathon runners or sprinters. You can't have joggers or walkers. That if you're one of those people who's like 9 to 5, but you're giving 100% 9 to 5, you're running that marathon, you know, to the best of your ability, fine. If instead you want to take a 2-week vacation, but you're running hard, also fine, right? But you can't, you know, it can't be like this weird mix of both, you know, where you're not running as hard as you can, and then you're taking the time. And I think it's how do you identify for each person what their cadence is and try to meet them where they're at. That's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. So let's go back to the brand stuff. We've got a couple more questions here. We'll try to take down a couple more before we end it. So if you have questions, again, drop them on the comments. Joe didn't hear this before, but Joe loves the hand clap or the light bulb. So if you like what you've heard, make sure to hit the hand clap, hit the light bulb. I like the heart. It makes me feel good. You know, it's like, wow, Jake, that was touching. So if you like what you hear, make sure, you know, you can feel free to let us know. So personal brand.
Yeah.
So personal professional brand. If you are a senior, let's say you're a mid-senior person. Let's say you're in your late 30s, early 40s. Why do you feel like, and let's say you work at a company, let's say you even work at like a small or a mid-sized company. Why do you think personal brand or this concept of brand is important? You know, why should they care? And it's not that they have to care, but why do you think they should care?
I think it accelerates the process. It accelerates the sales process. It gets you to a quicker yes or a quicker no. As humans in general are just lazy people, right? We were wired that way from the beginning, to not burn too many calories because we didn't know where we're getting our next meal. And so when you develop a brand or reputation, and again, some people have a freak out on brand, let's call it reputation. When you develop a brand reputation, what it does is allows you to be presently in everybody's face. So when they do have to make a decision, or they're in thinking about making a decision, they will explore you, and you actually do a little diligence on their behalf in order to get in their cycle. So that's why I think it's important.
What about, I mean, what do you think about long-term? Like, I guess one of the things I think a lot about too is what's the alternative? If you think about our communication channels, and it goes back to your same thing, what you're talking about. To me, I feel like, look, if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, or you're an entrepreneur or CEO, the channels that you're using to drive business today are becoming clogged at an alarming rate. And to me, brand and the ability to build a network and a community online is still so open, and especially on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And now is like, I feel like now is like the ground floor of the elevator. That now is like this very special moment in time on LinkedIn where organic reach is through the roof, and it's the first professional network that will go away if people don't really start to think about the impact that this can have sooner than later.
Agree 100%. So, there's a bunch of white noise out there, and what branding does is establishes a signal above that white noise. So that's number one. Number two is, you're spot on, is think about the ability to get that land grab early. And never has it been less expensive, easier to sidle up alongside world-class brands. So even if you're, whatever businesses are in, you could lay your brand next to Louis, next to Mercedes, next to Titleist. You can lay that out right next to everybody, no problem at all. And the way I think about brand is, too many people see it as too big of a lift in the beginning. It's a little like fitness. When you walk on, especially in American Street, when you see somebody who's fit, they stand out, right? And because the majority of people just are not anymore. They're dad bods, or they just had too many double whoppers, whatever they're called. But when you see people who are fit in a suit or a skirt or whatever it is, you're like, damn, they stand out. And you know what they did? They didn't go to the gym for 14 hours a day. They worked on their body, their brand, for like 20, 25 minutes, 7 days a week. Not a big lift, but a conscious lift, got in there, hit it hard for 25, 30 minutes, got out, and then did that day, week, month, year. And that makes it a lot easier to maintain that body/brand rather than going into the gym for 5 hours a day for 3 straight months. And you can certainly do that. It'll work, but I don't know what else in your life you're going to do. And that's sort of the analogy I leave with people when they're thinking about building their brand. It's not a really big lift, and it's not hard, and it's not easy. It's really a level of commitment and a repeatability and cadence that matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to summarize a lot of what you've been talking about, just a lot of this is routine, that how you've got, and look, and I think for a lot of people, you've been doing this for a while, right? This isn't some routine that like you were shot out of the womb, or like your very first 2 or 3 years in business, where I'm sure this is something that evolved over time.
About a 4-year lift, but I've been at this business for 30 years and I don't know anything new. All I've done is scaled it via media. That's all I've done. It's not like I took this magic pill and all of a sudden became, omniscient on everything in med tech and everything in headhunting. It's just that we've decided to scale it at a pace, at a rate, and at a level of competency that the industry's never seen before. And it's tremendously helped our business and has opened up doors. I think over the next 60, 90 days, you're going to see a couple of very large announcements coming out of our organization that I would attest to the ability of us to use media for branding.
I love it, man. All right, last question here. Yeah. We've got a follow on, which is going back to building the company. How do you, again, when you think about the best way, I mean, the question is, how do you design the relationship with the client for the long term? I mean, my quick take is like, you do amazing fucking work. That if you consistently align to the outcomes for the client and you're pushing and not acquiescing to what they think the outcome should be, you're also then helping them to see what that future should look like. And you're always aligning to what's next for them versus focusing on tactically executing what's in front of you or what you think they're giving you. That is how we align for the future. That is when we have clients for years and years and years that spend, millions or 6 figures with us, is we're constantly aligning to their business objectives along the way. We don't have a 6-month initial relationship and then say, okay, great, what's next? Right? We're constantly calibrating with the people, the C levels on strategic vision. Now it's for, now they're, either through or almost through 2020 planning. So if you're not a part of that conversation, you've missed a massive opportunity. So for me, that's how we've been successful, is constantly aligning to the strategy in the long game. I'd love to get maybe your take too, Joe, on how do you design the experience for clients? Maybe that can be an area you take it on, keeping them long term.
Yeah, so you nailed it, right? You've got to think long tail and then short tail and the deliverables. And you always want to be in with strategy, but you still have to execute on a daily basis, execute in mad fashion. One of the simplest things is to make sure you know exactly what they want and what they expect on what timeline, and then ask them why they want it. And when you ask them what they want and why they want it, you then can offer your expert point of view as another potential solution that they may not have thought of, or maybe they're just employing a legacy solution and they don't know the additional tools you have as a partner that might come into play, and they might be like, wow, I did not know you could do that for me. And that may be an analog for other things in their business that opens up pipeline for you. So, that's what I think it is. And then also, we're in service businesses. I would say with your really good clients, do things, and what we do, and I'll give you an example, do things that are so outside of, wait a minute, you're not going to charge me for that, that it makes it difficult for them to be able to do their business without you there. Give those things away and then back off. And again, it's not a game, but just say, hey, I'm going to do this for you. Like what we do is we'll go to a show, or we'll fly out, we'll be out at a location. There might be a client nearby. We'll come in and do a piece that might have cost my client 20 grand, 30 grand if a production company came in. We just shot it. We got the content. We'll double use the piece. We'll highlight them on the 80,000 eyes a day that see us on LinkedIn. No charge, because they've been such a great partner to us. That's another thing I would do. So I would look at what value you could add outside your inventory of skills in your organization.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think so many companies are so focused on short-term revenue that they don't really understand that by doing some of these things that you're unlocking, a longer relationship or cross-sell or new opportunities, because we're so focused on, but we can't give that away for free. And I see this in tech so much, man, where so many sales leadership just in general is so short-sighted that to think about the thought of actually just delighting a customer. Mm-hmm. And by the way, delighting a customer is not sending them swag. You don't, but I think that's what a lot of companies think, man. They do. They're like, if I just send them, I'll tell you what, it's not that sending swag doesn't help, right? They like it, but that's not how they're going to add value. I love that idea. And I think, look, you and I are both doing this consistently, giving away extremely valuable things and seeing them come back 10, 20, 30 fold. But not doing it because of that reason, doing it because it's the right thing to do and how to treat a customer.
It's how to treat a human being. I heard you talk about it, and our friend Mr. V talks about it, and we put a little bit of a different spin on it. We're like, give, and to be standing in plain sight when somebody needs something. And that's what media is all about, is just, I'm going to give you all kinds of content relative to your industry, and I'm going to give you all kinds of things that I want to give you because I really like doing business with you, and I'm going to be standing right here in front of you when you need something. And that's both parties win from that.
I love that. Yeah, instead of this the right hook. Yeah, I mean, my team gets on me about throwing more right hooks all the time, but again, I think it's because of that you can continue to build when you're not ever you're not asking. And that's with your client relationships. It's with your audience. It's all the same. So look, my man, we're at the top of the hour. I know we had some technical difficulties, but shit, life happens, man. But we got it all worked out, and I'm glad, man. I'm glad we finally caught up, man. I feel like we've had some conversations, and we caught up at that 4Ds event too, and so I'm glad we finally had a chance to shoot the shit. And then let's definitely catch up if you're in Austin, or next time, or if you're in New York too. Well, actually, next time I'm in New York, I'll hit you up too. So I definitely want to make sure we continue it. And then for everyone. The terrible part about these LinkedIn Lives is that they kind of go away. They don't get reshared in the feed. So there's two things that you can do. One, carry up our YouTube link. And so you can get all the different LinkedIn Lives. They're there. You can go back and find them, or tag yourself, or tag, your head of marketing, your CEO, anyone you think can benefit. And then it's really easy to come back. You can find them in my posts. So if you go back and look at my posts over the course of a given week, you'll find this session and more. So tag yourself. We'll drop the YouTube link in there as well too, and you can find it on YouTube. And then Joe, what about you, man? Any kind of parting thoughts? Anything like new you want people to check out?
Yeah, check out the docuseries we just dropped. We've put a lot of time, effort, and love into, called truefuture.tv. We're heading to Israel in about 2 weeks and exploring Startup Nation over there. But think of it, it's a short 10, 12-minute episodic around the medical device industry, but really the people, places, and culture that make it up. So I would love you and be thankful if you check that out.
I love that, man. So truefuture.tv, Kara, we'll share that here too as well in the comments. So my man, again, I really appreciate it, Joe. I'm glad we got a chance to do this, man. It was a long time in the making, and I'm glad we did it.
I appreciate the time, and I'm a huge fan of yours. Keep it up.
Thank you, man. You know, I'm a big fan of yours too, man. I love the cinematic quality. I feel like we're stealing from you constantly. So I appreciate it.
Let's do it.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later, bud.
Bye-bye.